Hello. Welcome to Season XV of the Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. In each episode, we both watch the same movie on our own and then record a conversation together about what we liked, what we hated, if we were scared, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. This season, we're watching movies from the 90s and talking about how they fit into the larger picture of 90s horror and how each year from that decade stacks up against the others. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the episode. Okay, so here we are, week 2 of our deep dive into horror movies from 1991, and this season we're doing 2 weeks on each year of the 90s and talking about the horror movies that came out, with the caveat that we won't be talking about sequels or remakes or movies that had a budget of over $100,000. Okay, so yeah, clearly I meant $100 million, not $100,000. Whoopsie. And we are trying to give the 90s a chance to redeem themselves, because a lot of times critics talk about them not being a good time for horror movies. Last week, we talked about Dead Space from 1991 and talked about some of the other movies that came out that year that we were not thinking about reviewing because they didn't meet the criteria. This week, we are going to talk about another movie from 1991, and then at the end, we will go back and see how 1991 and what we've watched from it stacks up against what we watched from 1990.
Yeah.
So we got a full plate today, but I'm excited to get into it with you.
Yeah. I'm ready for it.
So this is a movie that I think is near and dear to both of our hearts.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there may be some initial pushback because it could be called a sequel, but I will maintain to my grave that it's not.
Yeah. Anyone who's willing to say that is also welcome to fucking find out too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
So this week we're going to talk about Ernest Scared Stupid, and you're going to like it. Do you want to give a little context on the Ernest movies and what they were?
Ernest movies, to me, were life. Our life.
Yeah.
Okay? So, not all of them. I have a few that, like, just from childhood. I think, like, Ernest, like, the... didn't that originate, like, in, like, Arkansas or, like, Nebraska or something, like, with commercials or something like that?
I think it was Tennessee.
Was it Tennessee?
I remember correctly, but yeah.
Close-ish, you know,
yeah.
to here, or to us. And I don't know if that's the reason why, like, we, or maybe, yeah, I don't know if that's the reason why, like, why it was so, like, okay for us to watch, for my family. But Ernest Scared Stupid is a movie that my brother and I have been watching as long as I can remember, especially around Halloween. It's just a thing that's always been in my life. And then what happened was when I moved out and started living on my own, like, I created, like, my own Halloween tradition where I would make my nephews carve pumpkins with me and watch Ernest Scared Stupid. Like, that was the start of Halloween, basically, for me. And that's something that still goes from here on out. I tried to change it up one year, and I was like, I'm going to watch Halloween first and then go to Ernest Scared Stupid, and it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
But Ernest's movies are just, for me, just chef's kiss. Because I've watched, you know, it's one of those, like, you know, as an adult, what you're getting yourself into now. You know, you're like, okay, I get what these movies are, but it doesn't matter. I could sit there and watch these over and over and over. And it's actually funny. The first movie I ever downloaded illegally, don't worry, I don't do that anymore. But the one I downloaded illegally was Ernest Scared Stupid.
I love it.
Yeah.
Very on brand.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I didn't have money, so.
For me, Ernest Scared Stupid was kind of the white whale. It was like the one that got away because I wasn't allowed to watch it because it was Halloween themed and my mom thought that was satanic. Yeah. And so Ernest Saves Christmas, Ernest Goes to Camp, Ernest Goes to Jail, I saw roughly 1,000 times each in my childhood. And Ernest Scared Stupid is one that I was aware of, and I think I secretly watched it on TV one time.
Oh, yeah.
But it was just one of those that was like banned in the house. But that was always weird to me because Ernest was such like a constant presence otherwise.
Yeah.
And so then once I was out of the house, I've always felt like I'm getting away with something when I watch it. And now as an old ass man, I still feel that way. So I just have this like fondness for it. So anyway, that's just a little bit of background on why this was kind of an essential movie for us to pick for 1991 when talking about horror movies. I think as we get into it, you'll also see there are some other reasons why it is a good representation of horror movies in the 90s.
Yeah.
But we'll get into that more. I'm going to start with a quick introduction, and then you can do your fun facts. And then we will get into the shooting bullies with cat food is the most quintessentially 90s way to shoot a bully details.
Hell yeah.
In 1991, Buena Vista Pictures Distribution brought us Ernest Scared Stupid, a Halloween-themed horror comedy starring Jim Varney in his iconic role as Ernest P. Worrell. This movie tells the story of a troll who escapes after generations of imprisonment and begins capturing children to complete a ritual that will help him summon an unstoppable troll army. Ernest Scared Stupid was made on a budget of $9.6 million and made over $14 million at the box office. It can currently be rented for streaming. I somehow lost the entire second half of that. Like, it's just gone from my notes. So I was winging it there at the end.
I was glad I mute my mic sometimes because I definitely would have interrupted you between.
When I was frantically checking Wikipedia. Anyway, cool. So, but we'll get back on. So what did you learn about this movie?
So one thing I'm doing with this season is I'm going to provide facts if I got them. But I ain't got the time to research as much as I like to. But why I said that is because this is serendipitous. The reason why I have this fact. I was randomly on Reddit scrolling, and there was a video that was playing that explained a fact about this movie, and it involved two movies that are very dear to my heart: Ernest Scared Stupid and Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Mm-hmm.
So in Killer Clowns from Outer Space, that came out in 1988, also another movie that you can fart around and find out about. You know what I mean? It's one of my faves. I guess they use some of the same, the killer clowns were repurposed to be some of the trolls in this film because it was the same designer or production or something like that. I don't remember specifics now, but yeah. And so then I rewatched it, definitely saw some that was like, oh yeah, I definitely like, they had things I felt like added obviously texture wise to them, but I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. The only difference I think is the trolls in this are shorter than like what the clowns were in Killer Clowns from Outer Space, for the most part. But so it's the same. They use the same characters for both.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. It was just like, it was one of those where it's like, are we in a simulation? Because like those are, Killer Clowns from Outer Space is well known now. Like within the past like few years, like you could see their stuff at like Spirit Halloween. We went there a couple weeks ago, and like they had a whole section, But I don't think it was like the most well known movie before like 5 years or so. And then
before the internet.
United
the people who would be interested in seeing it.
Yeah, exactly. And then, Ernest Scared Stupid is very similar in the fact of like, I mean, it's also kids, Ernest Scared Stupid is kids. So, maybe not nearly as popular for everyone. But yeah, that's why I thought it was simulation, because like I have a very close like love for both of those films.
Yeah.
Or both these films, and they have a connection to each other. Made me feel good about it.
That's cute.
Yeah.
It was kind of an interesting experience coming back to this one after having done all these years of horror movie watching and commenting on.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we've actually, I think, even watched this together since we started. the podcast, but I haven't sat down and paid close attention to it and like taken notes. And so there were some things that jumped out to me this time through that I either hadn't really noticed or hadn't appreciated before. And one of those was just the long opening credit sequence where it's just Ernest looking goofy and scared in between a bunch of clips from old school horror movies. And I'm like, I recognize most of these. And that was kind of a cool way to start it off.
Pretty sweet. Yeah.
I felt like this movie definitely, even though it's like a goofy kind of horror comedy that is like kid appropriate, I feel like it did display some interesting like hat tips to real horror tradition and other movies. And one thing that I have never picked up on before, because I had never seen the other movie before, was that the whole intro on this was basically just an adaptation of The Devil's Reign.
Have I seen that?
Yeah, it's the one. I think William Shatner was in it.
Oh,
but they have like the old timey like pilgrims that have the guy that they say is the devil worshiper, and then they like imprison him, and then he breaks out and punishes their descendants later. Like, what does that sound
season?
Like?
With Ernest Borgnine, the big old nose dude.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You're damn right about that.
Yeah,
You're damn right about that.
That was just kind of funny to me because, like, okay, cool, like they worked that in, but then also even like the book that they were looking at to get more information about the troll, like I'm pretty sure that same like font and art style have been used in that exact same purpose in like 20 movies. It's like, oh, how do we overcome the malevolent power? It's like, this old book that's got great illustrations will tell us.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and it kind of I guess it kind of makes sense a little bit to me, just based off of like the budget. Repurposing or reusing definitely can help the budget, because what I saw the budget was like, I think it was like around like 8 or 9 million ish, something like that, under 10. So it's like, so this is what just happened. What I just said was the example of me like being a helicopter parent to a movie that I love. That's like, I'll make excuses for every fun thing. I don't care. This is the love of my life.
Yeah.
No, that's dope though.
I was just about to throw out that, and I think this is really more of a nod than laziness. Whereas if it was a movie I didn't like, I'd be like, oh, this is derivative and stupid. But it did crack me up when they were talking about how the people who had imprisoned the troll were cursed such that their descendants would just get dumber and dumber and dumber.
And then
it like goes to him being stupid. And in my notes, I said, Ernest isn't dumb. He just has a very mechanical intelligence.
He has a childlike heart.
Yeah. Very much so.
Yeah. He is. Yeah. Just. Yeah. It's definitely something I miss. As far as like I don't know what this was rated. I mean, adult.
It had to be PG, right?
You would think, but it is also 90s, man. So this could be.
You think it was a hard R?
No, I think 13. PG-13 is my guess. But I don't know. Let me see. It says. I don't know. I can't see, but this is like a prime example of one that like I watched definitely when I was too young. Even though this is for kids, like I remember being like legit, like scared from it.
Do you think this is the ideal first horror movie?
Well, if this was before this weekend, I would say yes.
Oh, okay.
But I've been watching some like old Disney, like Mickey Mouse cartoons with my son, and I think I have fallen in love with all of those cartoons even more, or like I guess ever. Like I never really watched them before, and so I'm gonna say that that's probably a good like first one. But if we're talking live action, yeah, this one. If we're talking cartoon, it's either Mickey Mouse or Nightmare Before Christmas. If it's live action, I'm going with this one or Halloween or Hocus Pocus.
I'd vote for this one over Hocus Pocus.
Yeah. Well, for a kid.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like,
Yeah.
I feel like this one did a lot of things that horror movies do.
It had scary
but
things.
in a kid way. You know what I mean?
It had scary things for kids in it. That's what I appreciate. You know, like it didn't try to overdo it, and it didn't try to dumb it down. It was a pretty good level of like scary, like when Ernest is his truck is getting pulled back by like the troll, like that whole chase scene can be scary for a kid, I would assume.
A little intense.
That was what scared me when I was a kid. That's why I said it.
Yeah. Well, another scene that really stood out to me was when the girl is in bed and she hangs over the edge to look under it, and she sees it's just her stuffed animal, and she's like really relieved and rolls over, and the troll is there in bed next to her. Like replace the troll with like, you know, a ghost or, you know, some zombie looking creature, like whatever, like insert whatever is the right contextual thing for any modern horror movie, and tell me that scene isn't lifted right out of everything we've watched in like the last 10 years, right? Like that is such a typical kind of set you up, and you have the relief, and then you have like the false relief, and then you roll over and see the real danger. Like that is such a by the book horror move, and it's almost like the movie would teach kids what to expect from horror movies, which like that tradition is almost like part of enjoying them sometimes.
Yeah.
And also liked the way the troll could use other people's voices to like lure the kids. And so he used Ernest's at one point, and then there was another time where Kenny heard Elizabeth calling to him from like that drain pipe, and then of course it's, you know, the troll and stuff. And those were just good kind of like, if you're a kid and you're not used to horror movies, those aren't things you've seen a million times. But it also, this is like a soft introduction to that, where it's not about to get like super gory or like, you know, scarring on an emotional level for the rest of your life.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely one that like maybe you watch as a kid and you're like, that creeped me out. And then when you get a little bit older, you're like, let's do it. Like, let's watch it again, like for that excitement. And then you're like, that's not necessarily scary, but I still love it. I still feel it. Yeah.
I also thought it was funny that the old witch called him the Great Redneck Hope.
Yeah.
Because I had not thought about that band in a really, really, really long time. And they're just kind of like chaos core, like chaos metal stuff.
Yeah.
But I just remember that being a name that was going around back in the day. And I had never put together that was a direct reference to this movie, which is pretty hilarious. Funny to me.
Yeah.
So, but
yeah, it's one of those things too. I think maybe because I was watching for the podcast where I was like getting more like irritated with how like adults were treating either Ernest or kids in this. Yeah. Like it was almost kind of like a little annoying and frustrating. Yeah. Whereas like before, I don't think I really paid attention much about it, but
I mean, it definitely does not hold up quite as well under like the critical eye, but that's not what it was trying to be. And a lot of what I noticed about it, or maybe what I was looking for in it, because this was the point I wanted to make, which is the thing that people do when they review things, was to notice how they took a lot of the same like concepts like you would see in a grown-up horror movie, and they just made it like kid friendly. So there's the scene where the kids go to the store and steal the milk and the squirt guns, and because, you know, like obviously a small town grocery store would be selling water guns at the end of October, but
it was the 90s though. Water guns were huge back then.
Those super soakers couldn't keep them in stock. Here it was milk, but like in other horror movies, you've seen people find out that the key is something else, and then they go like get that thing and use it to win. So the fact that it's milk here just means they took this same concept that you've seen a million times in horror movies and made it more relevant to kids by making it milk and squirt guns instead of, you know, some combination of like an old book or a certain spell or combination of ingredients, right? Like that's a thing that you're going to see over and over. And then I also thought it was kind of funny that at the end, Ernest mostly just realized that the troll needed a hug.
Mm-hmm. Like, mother's love.
Exactly.
The mother's love. Yeah. And he kissed him in the slime.
Yeah. And that was just kind of funny, the idea of, I don't know, like, I feel like in a lot of movies, the ending thing is just like, well, you just need to try harder, or you just need to believe in yourself more. You just need to decide that you want to win. And then they do. And somehow like that changes the whole like balance of the situation. So there were things in this movie that were ridiculous and over the top, but also they were patterns that you could point to in other movies that are presented in a much more serious way. And it bothered me way less in this one because they were not taking themselves seriously whatsoever.
Yeah. 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 You know, and I think there's something to say about like this is definitely obviously made for kids. And I feel like there was maybe a little bit different, like there was like underlying lessons for kids throughout this as well.
Oh, sure.
Where I feel like just in my history of 2 years of having a child, of watching 2 years of just terrible children's stuff, like I don't feel like there's that type of messages out with some of the newer stuff. And it's not anything like crazy, but like just like, you know, milk being good, you know, just things like that where milk's good for you, or like, you know, live with your parents, or what, you know, whatever the case is. Like there was a point to some of the stuff that Ernest was doing, and it was like, okay, well that's cool. Like if that lesson's being picked up, and it doesn't like take away from what we have. But that's like Ernest films altogether, you know, like there's always that message because it is for kids. And so for me, it's like exciting to watch this knowing like this is a really good children's like Halloween film. So like this is one that I'll continue watching with my kid as, you know, we get older, like in tradition, and knowing like unless he just, you know, unless he just is kind of a scaredy cat, he should be okay watching this movie with old pops every you know, October, you know. And it's just a one that I know that he won't necessarily have to worry too much about. Or if he gets scared, it's not like the time when I was in elementary school and me and my brother and my parents watched Halloween 3. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
There's like a difference there.
Yes, right, for sure.
Yeah.
And that's what I was kind of trying to get at, is like this one does, it kind of scratches the horror itch, but also feels like one that would be somewhat safe to share with your kids. So for whatever that's worth. Did you have anything else you wanted to cover, or do you want to get into how 1991 stacks up against 1990 based on what we've watched so far?
So we could get into 1991. I'd probably just repeat myself a lot if I continued on. I just want to make a point about the scene where the troll is getting him in his truck. Mm-hmm. That's a creepy scene that's happening.
Oh, agreed.
There.
Yeah.
Like that, you know, I had it holstered because generally, even though we talk about it every week, I never have like a favorite scene. Like, I can't make decisions. Mm-hmm. I made a decision this one where it's like, that's it. You know what
I mean? You made that decision roughly 30 years ago.
Yeah. And I've stuck to it this whole time. But we could go ahead and go with 1991. And also for the listeners, just know we understand what we got ourselves into with this film. This was my pick. If you got a problem with it, come to Oklahoma. We'll watch it together and you'll enjoy it. If you haven't ever seen this film and you're listening to this podcast, first off, that's dope. So you don't even know what you're getting yourself into. Second, you should watch this film, Carving Pumpkins. Trust me. Mm-hmm. Just trust me.
Yeah.
Do it.
I like it.
Yeah.
So, as far as our rankings go, what we have decided this season is that at the end of our episodes on each year of the 90s, we're going to revisit the previous years and take into account the movies that we're watching this season, but also any that we've reviewed from that year in previous seasons. So, what is on the ticket for 1990 is It, which is the original made-for-TV version that was in 2 parts, Jacob's Ladder, and Arachnophobia. Pretty decent lineup. For 1991, though, we got People Under the Stairs, Silence of the Lambs, Dead Space, and Ernest Scared Stupid.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a pretty difficult choice.
This one kind of hurts, dude.
Right?
Because the 1990 It, man.
Yeah.
That's very dear to my heart, too, for the same reasons.
Would it make a difference to you if we referred to it as It Part 1 and It Part 2?
No, I'll go with 1991 just because of the main character's ponytail and it.
Oh, that was rough.
That was terrible.
Rough. Yeah. Jacob's Ladder, really good, though. It Part 1, really good. But I agree that
Jacob's Ladder
ponytail is a...
So far out of what we watched, Jacob's Ladder has been the surprise favorite. Like one I didn't see before, and then I watched it and was like, "Holy shit, this is really good."
Yeah,
like really, really good. I really enjoy that film, but I do think that 1991 wins for me. Unfortunately for the listeners, under a very biased opinion, I technically did call this when we were talking about the season, but it wins it for me. And then also you throw in People Under Stairs. Are you effing kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, this is just what I'm about. And I was only I wasn't too old when this came out. I don't remember.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like I'm kind of starting to see a little bit of a trend around this time that I hadn't thought about before, which is more kind of horror movies targeted at a younger audience. So I feel like in the 70s and 80s, it was really big on like the slashers, and that was clearly not movies to watch with your kids. But I feel like with People Under the Stairs and Arachnophobia and Ernest Scared Stupid and Gremlins and some of the other stuff that was coming around this time, there definitely was more of like a focus on making, I guess, horror movies that were kid accessible. And so that's an interesting trend that I want to see, like how far into the 90s that goes, just because it's not a thing I've paid attention to before.
Yeah.
But for me, Silence of the Lambs is
that's true.
Pretty epic. And obviously, like, I don't think Dead Space helped the conversation much. But I just think that Silence of the Lambs, Ernest Scared Stupid, People Under the Stairs, that's a pretty good combo. Jacob's Ladder and It Part 1 and like the first half of Arachnophobia were all good. But I think 91 kind of takes the edge for me too. So at the end of our episode on 1991, so far our rankings are leading the way is 1991 and in close second.
Very close.
But also last is 1990.
Listen, 1990, you're a good year. You know,
so far
you did the best you could, but 91 paved out. But hey, don't worry, 90 and 91, because we got 92 coming up.
You got a new challenger stepping in the ring.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to be back next week to see what 92 is bringing to the table. And we will do our typical, hey, here's the movie, which is going to be Man Bites Dog. And then here are all the movies we chose not to talk about because they didn't meet our criteria. And it's a pretty good list this time around.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah, it is.
Cool.
Yeah. It's a good decade or good year.
They just go by so fast. And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com or hit us up on the IG. That's what the kids call Instagram. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.